So in this lecture, you saw that we had a detailed in-depth discussion about the k-means algorithm, and we had a look on 3 different examples in which we had an input data set, we applied k-means algorithm on that data set, and we formed different clusters depending upon the attributes and properties of the input data set. So in this way, you can apply k-means algorithm to different problems with different data sets in which you don't have some labeled data, and you can form different groups and clusters in order to understand the underlying properties or attributes of the data set. So there are a number of advantages and disadvantages of the k-means algorithm, and some of the pros and cons of the k-means algorithm you can see in this slide. K-means works well when the data form compact clouds well separated from one another. So one limitation you can say is that about the k-means algorithm is that it works perfectly when we have the separation between different data points, which is very well separated data points, and in that case it can form compact clouds. Method is scalable. So good thing is that this method k-means is scalable, which means that you can increase the number of data set and increase the number of compute nodes, and it works quite efficient for large data sets, right? So its complexity can be given with nkt, where k is the total number of cluster and n is the total number of objects, and the t are the total number of iterations which we are performing. Can only be applied where the mean of a cluster is defined. So here is another limitation of the k-means clustering. It shows that we can apply k-means clustering only if we have the mean of the cluster very well defined, right? If there are categorical, for example nominal or binary data, then maybe we will not be able to form clusters based on the k-means algorithm in that case. So it is necessary that the mean of the cluster should be defined very well. Users may not be able to select a good value of k. So as you have seen that although we have some methods like elbow method, but it happens that sometimes elbow method is unable to give us the optimal value for k, and you saw that the value of k, which is the total number of clusters that will be formed from the input data set, needs to be selected very optimally. So if this value has not been selected optimally, then our results generated from the k-means algorithm will be very poor, and it's very hard to determine the value of k perfectly. Algorithm is sensitive to noise, and because if you have some outliers in your data set or some noisy patterns available, then in that case the performance of the algorithm can be affected, which can influence the mean attribute value significantly. So because the presence of outliers will have an impact on the calculation of the mean, because you are calculating mean or average in order to update the cluster centroids. And so if some noise is present or if some outliers are present in the data set, then in that case the mean can be calculated wrongly, and it will affect the centroids of the cluster. And if the centroids of the cluster are not being able computed perfectly, then the clusters will not be accurate. There are a number of variations which different researchers have made in the basic k-means algorithm, and one of the variation is the k-medioids variation, in which instead of taking the mean, we are basically using the medians of each cluster, right? So you know that what is the difference between a mean and a median is, for example, mean of these points will be 5 and these points will be 205, but the median of these points will be these 5. So the basic difference between a k-means and k-medioids is the usage of median instead of mean. So the advantage of using median instead of mean is that it is not affected by the extreme values. right? So extreme values can also occur in case of noise or in case of outliers. So if you have some noisy data or you have a number of outliers, so instead of trying with the basic k-means algorithm, you can go for the k-medioids, in which we calculate the median, and for extreme values it will not have a major impact, as you will see in the k-means algorithm. And for large databases, you can use sampling technique in k-medioids. So the k-medioid method is less sensitive to outliers, right? So as I have explained that since if you have some outliers or noise present, then it's better to use k-medioids because it is less sensitive to outliers. Each cluster is represented by the most central object in the cluster. So since we are calculating the median, and median is basically the central point, so you will see that by using k-medioids, the cluster is basically represented by the central object in the cluster. And this is also one of the targets of the clustering algorithm, that we want to have the cluster centers as a central object. We still minimize the sum of dissimilarities between each object and its cluster reference point, for example the squared error criterion. So this thing is same as the k-means algorithm, because we are trying to basically minimize the sum of dissimilarity, and that will be with the help of some squared error criteria, which we have also seen in the k-means algorithm. Now let's have a look at different applications where k-means clustering is used heavily for different purposes. So it is being used in marketing, and in marketing it is used to discover customer groups and use them for targeted marketing and reorganization. Similarly, it is also being used in astronomy, and in astronomy it is being used to find groups of similar stars and galaxies, because it can be a necessity for astronomy that they want to make different clusters of similar stars or galaxies, so they can apply k-means clustering to form the clusters of stars and galaxies. And in order to study the effect of earthquakes, and different studies from the earth sciences, they basically use k-means clustering in order to analyze the effects of earthquakes. And k-means clustering has also been applied on genomics. And you know that in genomics we have some genes data set related to different genes, and the target is to basically analyze the genes patterns and the underlying structure of different genes. So in genomics, k-means clustering can be very helpful in order to find the group of genes. We can form different cluster of similar genes, and we can have different, if we have different similar expressions within each gene, then we can use those expressions in order to form clusters of related genes. So this can be very handy in such kind of domain. So let's summarize what we have covered in this lecture. We basically targeted an unsupervised learning domain in which we studied k-means clustering algorithm, and we saw that it is a very powerful and useful algorithm in which we can form the clusters or groups of data which have similar attributes and similar values. And in that case we don't have our label data, and we don't need that. And we saw that we can apply these clustering techniques in a number of applications. So this was it for k-means clustering. Hopefully for next lecture I will show you an Python example as well, and we will discuss one or two other clustering algorithms, and hopefully that will cover all the material that was included for this course. So for the next lecture we will see one or two other clustering algorithms. So please view and saw this recording 2-3 times, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A session. Thank you very much.